Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Diamond Dialogue with Onyeka Akumah. We're excited to see everyone here today. And honestly, this is going to be so exciting because the book was truly, truly inspiring for us as entrepreneurs and even people that just want to understand how to switch from corporate life to owning your own thing. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join, and then we're going to get started with the questions. So I think we can get started. I see some people popped in and we're excited for this dialogue. And my name is Sarra Ali. I'm the founder of Diaminates, and we are a business that focuses on scaling small and medium-sized enterprises by connecting them with tailored solutions. And I'm super excited to be hosting this today with Onyeka because honestly, the book was really legendary. I feel like I left, finished reading the book and I felt truly inspired to continue building and not to ever quit. So I'm gonna get started with Onyeka if you're ready for our first question. What is your earliest childhood memory that shaped your mindset as an entrepreneur?
All right. I want to thank you, Sarah, for this opportunity to share about the book and share about my lessons. I'm really excited about what I've put together, and I'm looking forward to once the book goes live today on Amazon, over the next couple of hours on Amazon, people can order it. And thank you for the opportunity. Haven't read the book. You asked me about my earliest entrepreneurial lessons and experience and journey. What sparked this whole thing for me? I think it was, I mean, like I shared in the book, it started from when my mom. So for me, it was that I wanted to get a Christmas gift. It was just around this season. And in that particular year, I was 12 years old, and I was there, like every child, you're chipping to your parent. In this case, my mom at that time. I was saying to her that I wanted this particular gift, and she kept on hearing me nag and nag about it. And then one day, sometime around September of that year, she came back one day with a box of day-old chicks. You had about so 200 day-old chicks there, and I was just looking at her, and she said, "This is your Christmas gift." I'm like, "Okay, what do you mean?" And she said, "Take this and grow these birds, and they should be fully grown birds by in the next 3 months. And then you sell the birds. You will sell the birds, and when you sell them, whatever you make from that, you can go ahead and buy your gift." I was like, "Okay." So I took it. It was exciting for me, and I started raising these birds. She was getting me buying the feeds. I'll put it. She was buying all the things I need, nutrients I'll put in place. I was monitoring how the birds were growing, and they grew into full-blown chickens. Some of them died. It was emotional for me because I got so attached to them. I even started naming them, tagging them, chicken X, chicken Y, chicken Z, and at at Christmas, we then sold a couple of those birds, and I was able to then get my Christmas gift. And she got back to me and said that this is a lesson for me that anything I want in life, I can use my hands to create. I should just use my talent and use my hands to create. And I think it was a spark. So I didn't even know the word entrepreneurship. I mean, don't get me wrong. But it was a spark for me to understand that I could actually build things out of what I had in my hands. And so that happened, but there was another part of the story where I didn't do that business the next year, and that was because some of the birds that we didn't sell, maybe for size or for some reasons, we just didn't sell those birds. We ended up preparing them for the holiday. And you can imagine I was 12 and chicken X. I know chicken X, we didn't sell chicken X. Then I hear that chicken X is now being sold, it's now been prepared for us as dinner. It just messed up with my mind. And I think I got another lesson there where she then said to me, I shouldn't be emotionally attached to the business that much. I think it was a brilliant lesson. So I think this was where it started from me. And I didn't go ahead to do the chicken business any longer. Well, later on, I built an agri-tech startup. But it was one of my earliest lessons in entrepreneurship. The next was when I was 15 and I was trying to buy a computer. This time around, I wasn't looking at buying the computer with my hand. I wanted to do stuff to create value to buy the computer. And so I set up a business center in a place called Aja of Lagos. And I mentioned it in the book. It was the first business center. And the business center then was just buy an umbrella. So I spent 5,000 naira. I bought an umbrella, bought a plastic chair. I was able to recruit my first employee at 15, and I was paying him equivalent of about 5,000 naira per month. And I would go to CMS, an area busy suburb in Lagos, buy recharge cards. I'll bring it over. We sell them. I add a little margin and make some money. In the first month, I bought a keyboard. Second month, I bought a mouse. And eventually, I was able to then buy my computer over a period of 1 year. Um, and eventually, I closed that business. So I think these were my earliest lessons.
No, that's absolutely amazing. And I find the story very interesting. I was like smiling when reading that part because it's quite interesting how early age when your situations happen to you actually translate later to your life. And I think it's so important because you truly did not stop building. But
Yeah.
right before building businesses, you had a wide range of corporate experiences with organizations like British Council, Deloitte, and Jumia. How did you navigate this diversity? And did you strategically plan these experiences to align with your long-term goals? And what were the significant lessons from each role?
Okay, so I think it places an importance in mentors, and I had a very early mentor in my career. After I was done with school, I had a mentor at that time, Victor Kibo, who who guided me on. So I went to him and asked him a question around how I could channel my career. This was before those jobs that you mentioned, and we sat down and we looked at the way I was built as an individual, what I was excited about, what I was gifted in at that time. And one was marketing. So I was very good with marketing. Well, not so good, but at least I had some strength in digital marketing. And the second was technology. So I was a very good programmer. I could write codes, I could build software, and so he said to me, I could either become a chief technology officer or a chief marketing officer. And he told me to go and check the path of these individuals who existed in Nigeria at that time and see how they became each, and then decide which path I wanted to take. So I came back to him, I think a week later, and told him I had decided I wanted to become a chief marketing officer of a company that is known all over Nigeria. I didn't know which company, but one that's known all over Nigeria, but I wanted to lead their marketing effort. This was in 2008 into 2009. And so he said to me, okay, so then you have your part. Now chase it and be the best. So I started looking at the parts of the people that had gone from the level I was in at that time into becoming chief marketing officers. And I saw the roles they took on. And so it helped me craft out three main angles. I needed to learn offline marketing, online marketing, and offline marketing, online marketing, press and media management. So I started from that point looking at my strength to say, okay, I was good with digital marketing, that was it. I wanted to start learning other areas. And so each job that I moved on to afterwards were jobs that were helping me to build my skill in a particular area. So when I got into Deloitte, I was looking more at the digital marketing area and cementing that. When I got into Waka now, I trained under a very good consultant who had worked on President Obama's campaign in the US for about 6 months. I had the opportunity to work with him from a digital marketing perspective before executing digital marketing campaigns. And it made me really stand out at that time, which I'm grateful to God I had the opportunity to get. When I left Waka now to Jumia, I took on the opportunity because it was going to open me up to offline marketing efforts. And those offline marketing efforts were included with partnerships. So I was going to be involved with some bit of sales and partnership with the media buyings I needed to do. And that was the focus of the role. It even came at a point where I had to take a pay cut as much as 55% pay cut on my previous role just because I was going after that skill set that I wanted. When I was done with that, eventually I then got a role in Conga where I became vice president of marketing, and that was now helping me to cement all the things I had gathered over the period. I mean, this spanned many years, but that was what inspired my path. So maybe in a way it was strategic, maybe in a way I was deliberate. On my CV, you will see that I moved a lot, but each move was something I wanted to get. If I don't get it in the current role, I negotiate with my bosses and see if I can create that role first. I always did that. If I can create that role, then I look for an opportunity to express myself outside as I look to build myself in those roles. So I think the context was where that came from as I moved within those organizations until I eventually started building my own businesses.
No, that's truly amazing. And I think the role of mentors is amazing. And since you mentioned that, I would like to ask you just a follow-up question. What do you see as the role of mentors in your journey in general?
I think for me, mentors have helped me generally. In each stage and each season of my life, I've had to identify mentors to guide me. I've had mentors. I mentioned Victor at the time when I was deciding what path to take in my career. I've had mentors when I had to make decisions and maybe in different areas, relationship, family, business. And sometimes, and the way I identify these mentors, I look at people that have done things that have opened up opportunities and attacked of those opportunities in ways that I would love to do it. I don't necessarily approach the mentors head on. I look for ways to create value. If it's a mentor that I want to have a personal relationship with, I first want to create value for them and then use that to let that mentor know that I exist and I really want them to have an impact in my life. I don't hound them. I don't make them feel like I am a nuisance. I try to make sure that I put a great sense of understanding into how I manage the relationship and their time so that I'm not intrusive, so I'm not one that every time they see my call, they're like, what does this guy want? So I do that and I manage it, but I think I've also seen that they are mentor for seasons. And in my career as I grow, I've seen that there are some mentors that have transcended different seasons with me. Usually, when it comes to maybe personal areas of my life that I need their guidance. But as I grow, I continue to identify new mentors to learn from, new teachers to learn from, and build relationships with them and continue to grow. So it's been absolutely important. I'm not naive of the fact that there's nothing new under the sun, and I use these relationships to learn from them, guide myself, and make decisions, better decisions in the things that I need to do. So yes, that I think that has been the importance of mentors with me.
No, honestly, that's really amazing. And there was a section in the book where you made it very clear you differentiated between mentors, cheerleaders, and coaches. Um,
Yes.
I hope you can give us a little bit about that as well. And this is a second follow-up, but this is a point that I found very important.
Yeah, so I think for me, the way I look at it is a cheerleader is one that is able to talk about. I mentioned this, I think, in the ninth chapter of the book. A cheerleader is one that's able to talk about you and your business in a room where you have no business in. Literally, you've not gotten into that room, and so they take your business and they talk about it. They open up opportunities. Cheerleader for me, for instance, in Farm Crowd, he was the vice president of Nigeria at that time, who was constantly when he's on TV and he's talking about youths doing stuff, he will doing stuff that are impressive. He will mention my company at that time, Farm Crowdy, and you mentioned my name amongst other people. That consistently opened up people to pay attention to us in rooms that we weren't in. Now that's a cheerleader. So you may have a personal relationship or no relationship with the person, but they are people that love your business and want to talk about it in a room. The second are mentors. Now, with mentors, I described they are people that you're not going to be intrusive. You're not going to be. Once in a while, you have the opportunity to ask them questions. You have the opportunity to connect with them and learn from them. It's not like it's a clear cut out timeline of how you're meeting this person consistently. Ideally, that is a mentor. There are also people that they may be working with you and working with 1,000 other people that they call their mentees, who are all learning from them. You may have a direct relationship with them, or you may not. They are not necessarily hand holding you all the way. A coach, however, is just like a football coach, is one that holds your hand. Your success is their success, and they are invested in your growth as much as you are invested in your growth. They know a lot about you. They know extensively how much you've grown as an individual. They've understood where you're coming from. They are trying to impact themselves deliberately. Coaches don't have so many people they are managing. They usually have just a few people per time they're managing, and that coach is responsible for making sure your success happens in whatever area that coach is responsible for you. So you may have a coach that is, and also by proximity, they should be one that you can easily access and have a systematic way of engaging. So I think I try to differentiate the three, so that you identify who you put in each category and you understand how you relate with these three different set of people that should have an impact on your life and your business.
No, thank you for sharing that. Honestly, whenever everyone will read the book, they would see much more about how this is very important and really identifying truly who are those people that can support us in moving our journey forward.
Yeah.
So just moving on to the next question, you emphasize also the importance of delegation in your book, which I find very exciting because this is something I also struggle with as an entrepreneur. That what would you say to entrepreneurs who are hesitant to delegate because they want to learn everything themselves?
That's a very good question. Um, I think one of the examples I gave in the book was when I was in Wakana, and in fact I had so many lessons from Wakana just by the experiences I went through there, and the founders then one of the founders of Wakana, Raf, was saying to me that one day he just got up to me and said, so I was a superstar. I mean, I had just finished learning from that expert digital marketing guy. I had implemented some nice things from a digital marketing perspective. The numbers had gone up 8x in one day, and everything was just amazing. But it was just me. And so Ralph had a hard time just understanding that it was just Onyeka. And he said he came to me and he was like, um, you must replicate yourself. Like you just said it that way. You must replicate. I didn't understand that. I'm like, man, but I'm doing my work. The whole thing, everything is smooth, everything is soft, everything is good. Why are you on my case to replicate myself? And this guy gave me a hard time until I just said, okay. I started asking the head of HR how I would go about it. I had never recruited in a professional job. I never had team members that reported to me at that time in corporate world. So I was like, okay, we had to put interviews, we had to set up interviews. I had to start interviewing people. And then I started recruiting people. I started recruiting super smart people. But I was struggling with getting them to do the work the way I wanted the work done. And so I would give them tasks to do. I end up taking the task over and I want to do it myself. And I think Raf got a wind of it and he started hitting again on me. You have to delegate. I'm like, yeah, but I'm delegating, but this guy is not impressing me. He said, that's your business. I had to start thinking of what do I do to find these guys to make these guys do it as better, as good as I would do it. And that was when I started learning that you need to trust your team members. If you get very, so if your recruitment process wasn't faulty and you actually got very good people to the team who are hungry as you are, and want to learn, you have to take risks with them and give them the opportunity to show themselves. Give them the platform to show themselves. So I had to take a seat back and allow them work. And when they didn't meet the criteria or the standard that I wanted or I would deliver on, I had to take a new cap of teaching. So I would teach, I would guide, and I will make them understand how I would want it done and show them how I was doing it. Now, within a period of 4 to 5 months, these guys started doing things at my level. Within a period of another 2, 3 months, they started doing it better than I would even do it because they were specialists. So they would take a task and they would execute on it better than I even would have done it. And I immediately started seeing how much free time I had to be a lot more strategic in how I reason or come up with ideas as against being the implementator myself. Yes, I wasn't going to let go of not getting my hands dirty and doing the work when I needed to. And instead of doing it as the one that wants to shine, I started doing it as a team player. So these things helped me. Um, I saw the ability to free up time for myself to be a lot more strategic than Anson. I saw the ability for me to be able to pass on knowledge to these guys and guide them. And eventually they became better than I was in executing. So I think in delegating these advantages, everyone wants free time to be able to be a lot more strategic as a leader. I find that useful in delegation. And then you build other leaders, you build other lieutenants, you build other people in your team to grow with you. I think those are things that I found very useful that I shared also in the book.
No, that's no, thank you so much for sharing that. And also, I found that within the book, I realized you were very good at also selecting people to join your team. And I think that's like kind of like the power of network. But how do you usually find the people to do kind of like join you on a specific mission?
Oh, okay. So in with my businesses, one of the things I do is if it's about speaking about identifying co-founders, the best of co-founders I've seen are those that I've had long-term relationships with before the idea. So we are first friends before we had an idea. That is usually my best um, those are usually my best co-founders, and some of them maybe 3 to 5 years of knowing ourselves. Even if it's just 2, 3 months, we didn't know ourselves because we had an idea we're chasing. We knew ourselves because there were core values that we had together, that cemented our places as friends. I could depend on you. I could understand your personality. You had complementary skill sets that was going to help me in my business. So this, in one way, was how I identified the right kind of partners, people to work with me in the team. Now, when it comes to individuals or people working for my companies, one of the things I do is the first person I always recruit after the founders is my head of people or HR manager. And the reason I do that is to craft out the core values, to craft out the culture we're trying to create so that there's an understanding of what we want to build. And once that is all laid out, we have our core values, we start recruiting on the basis of that. So, and the interview process is everyone that has worked with me, I've had over um, 500 individuals that have worked with me in my companies. They will tell you for a fact that every time they go through the recruitment process, stage one is to show your talent. You have a great CV. We recruit you to we bring you into the interview process to tell us what you can do. Stage two is you're meeting most likely the person you'll be reporting to, and that person will be drilling further than the things you've done with the head of HR. Stage three is where we assess you on our core values. And many times people will go through stage one, they're fantastic individuals. They are maybe people that have impressed the manager that they will work with. But when it comes to core values, you start looking at an individual that doesn't want to learn, has so much chip on the shoulder and is so arrogant that wouldn't want to work with other team members, or maybe has been in a place where they've been consultants all the while and now they're going to find it difficult fitting into the setting of working with other people, and you just identify something. So we at that point we start we really go through the process of saying, hey, this is a person we can work with, or this is the person we can work with. So I think in identifying team members, whether it's as co-founders or as core team members in your organization, this is how we have done it. And just to point out, Sarah, as much as I've shared, I did share my own lessons in the book, right? And these were my own experiences. It doesn't mean it's a template for what every other person should experience and go through. So I have done my own bit of sharing. My hope is people take from it and add it to whatever they have and then do better with themselves. So I just wanted to chip that in because I mean, as much as I've shared now with what I just said, I want people to still know you also have to find ways of customizing it for yourself and not necessarily saying that, oh, because Onyeka said it's this way, it must be that way. You have to find what works for you.
No, absolutely. I think that's a very wise words coming out from Onyeka actually, because sometimes you see some things or you get guided by certain approaches, but then what works for you is really just a very mild twitch, or like they mentioned, or they say you add your spice to it. So no,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you mentioning that. You've also pointed out that people who are raising seed funds should be like that should be used to double down on proving product market fit rather than experimenting. But how
Mm.
much room do you think that entrepreneurs should leave for experimentation, and where do they draw the line?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that where I wrote about that in the book came from my lessons with Quick Gist when we raised some funding and all the ideas that I had, I wanted to implement everything right away. I think the problem was we didn't do a proper analysis of how soon we're going to be generating enough money to sustain ourselves or at least get to the next round of funding. And that hurt us badly. So I think that was where that contest came from. And what I've come to see is the best for me. My best approach has been when you raise capital, double down on what you were doing when you raise that capital so that you can win your market with it. Show product market fit, show product market fit good enough for you to go to the next round of funding. As against now, in terms of experimentation, as founders, playing and being creative and being innovative is the blood of why is the very reason of why we do the things we do as founders and come up with new things. But when you raise your seed funding, I mean, just by the concept of the name seed funding, you're meant to use the funding to plant a seed. It's it would be wise for the founder to focus on planting that seed in the ground and nurturing it well enough to become a tree that then extends into other areas by getting more funding to then start experimenting, especially when you don't have so much funds to play around with. You may want to just double down on what got you the funding in the first place. And if there's any form of experimentation you want to do it at a minimal cost. Um, if possible, less than 5% to 10% of the total funding can go into an experiment project. But let the core of what you raise your funding for, and especially with the investors you communicated to and said, my use of funds will be for X, whether it's recruiting, whether it's building on the product, whether it's expansion to XYZ place, whatever you've said is going to be your use of funds. Ideally, you want to double down on that and make sure that that happens because that will in itself give you the opportunity to raise further funding down the line.
Amazing. No, thank you for sharing that. I totally agree. And I think I'm also one of those who sometimes feel like a little bit of experimentation space would allow for creativity, but also it's very important to just make sure that whatever you communicated to begin with, I really like that seed example you gave, which makes more sense. Like grow on that first, and
Yeah,
then I'll allow just maybe 5% of your fund to be for creativity. But as entrepreneurs, we have this canvas that in our minds there's just so much going on and a lot we want to try. But it's very important to just stay grounded to what we really raise funds for.
yeah.
You've also mentioned like the idea of seasons in your book. Can you elaborate on identifying like the right season for action or change in one in a, like entrepreneurial journey?
Oh, okay. So I touched on seasons, and I'm actually going to be spending um, a lot more time speaking about seasons in the future because I have gone through seasons in my life. I've gone through very high seasons where the sun is shining and everything is all rosy and good. I've gone through very low seasons, and so I was speaking more about that. But I mean, the context of what I shared in the book, um, every entrepreneur must understand that if you're building a business or even in life in general, we all have seasons. And I will use four seasons to describe this. You have your winter season or your cold season. You have your spring season. So let me, okay, for the sake of this example, I'll just say you have your spring, you have your summer, you have your winter. I'll just use those three. And in the winter season, what happens is it's the coldest time of a person's life or of a business. It's when you've looked at all angles of your business and it just feels like everybody has forgotten you, or you're no longer the talk of the town, or you're no longer blossoming, you're no longer as vibrant as you should have been. As an individual, it may be the time when people are saying all sorts of things about you. You're not as loud as you were, or as involved as you were in circles that you were in. And it's that period where I've come to see that the best of entrepreneurs take that season to get deeper. I'm going to use the example of a tree. When the tree goes through the winter season, the leaves are off the tree. People look at the tree and they want to cut the tree down and use it for firewood for the cold because they feel it's not useful. People look at the tree and they feel like it's dead. Everything around the tree is gone. You just see dry branches. But what is that tree doing at that period? That is when the roots of the tree is getting deep. As it's looking for water, you may find that the roots of the tree is as deep into the ground as the trunk that is coming off the ground to find water, to find nutrient, to find new purpose, to find new reason to survive. With the mindset that this is the season to build, to evolve, to grow as an individual, and get ready for the next season. Now, the next season is your spring season. In the spring season, some drops have started coming. Some funding has come. People have maybe started paying attention to you. The media outlets have started paying attention to you. Don't forget the previous season and where you're coming from. And it's one of those things I was sharing. And you take that season and you say, oh, there's a new bountiful harvest coming. So you've used your winter season to prepare. The spring has started showing you what is coming. You have started putting things in place for the fruits that will fall off. You've started getting the right people in place and you're getting ready. Summer will definitely come. High season where the sunshine is on you and everything you do turns to gold. It will always come. And so this in itself was how I try to describe seasons without going too deep with them. But I mean, like I said, I'll spend more time speaking about them. The summer season, don't take for granted that you're in a summer season in your business and look at somebody else in his winter season and think that they're useless. Don't take for granted that you're in the summer season and you have to keep enough for you in the winter season. Many startups went through a summer season in 2020, in 2019, 2020, 2021, when the funding, you could just literally go out with a PowerPoint slide and raise millions of dollars in funding. But many of them used that season and wasted it doing so many wrong things to the point where when winter came, many of them couldn't survive. Many of them couldn't thrive. Many of them could go through winter. We're going through what I call a winter to spring season right now in the startup space with entrepreneurs, and we see the opportunity for them again to spring up again and do amazing things in the years to come. So I think that was how I tried to describe seasons, both from a personal perspective, because I talked a bit about my own personal seasons, and from a business perspective.
No, that season's example is super true. And I think it's important for us to just understand that like not everything is going to be linear. And I feel like one of the things that I felt when reading the book was really resilience because you had those seasons throughout in all of your businesses. So I kind of have a follow-up question on that. Like, how do you keep yourself like motivated to keep building, even when you're
Mm.
like, in a tough season?
That's a very good question. I think in keeping myself to stay motivated, one of the things I do consistently is to remind myself about why I started the business in the first place. So if I keep my eyes on the vision, I keep reminding myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. and it keeps motivating me to get up in the morning and give my best every single day. That is one. Two is I always go to bed in the night trying to sleep like a baby, forgetting literally everything that happened the previous night, and wake up the next morning like a child that just wants to conquer the world as though he has no problems in the past. That mentality has driven me to continue to fire on even when I should be tired. It has driven me to continue to push forward even when things are tough, especially when those seasons are tough. The third thing is I don't try to surround myself with the right people. And when I get it wrong, I try to distance myself from those that are people that are what I call anchors, or people that may hold you down and want to continue to pull you down. Surrounding yourself with the right people is very important, whether it's from a family, your nuclear family perspective, and also your team members. But in order to get the right people, you need to also communicate effectively to them what you're dealing with or where things are and how you grow things. Now, I speak to this not just in times when things are tough, but also when things are good. You do not take for granted when things are good and waste them. And so we keep resources for that and stay grounded. That has helped. Um, I think one last thing I'll say is I find ways to let steam out. As well, I use exercises, I use books, I try to read about other people that have gone through their own experiences. So the exercise of reading a book about someone that has gone through something similar, the exercise of working on myself as an individual and staying sane as much as I can, these exercises help me. The exercise of staying connected to God, to know that there's a higher person that is influencing what you're doing, it's very, very important also for me. So those exercises, the three of them for my body, exercises for my with God, and then the exercise of just making sure that I put myself in a place where I can learn from the lessons of another man or woman who has done something similar, and then I can use that to build myself from their books. Those things help me to know that I'm not alone. I think the last thing is just keeping a positive mindset that tomorrow is going to be better. I think it's one thing people hear me say the most. It'll be better tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes, it'll be better tomorrow.
No, honestly, you're dropping gems on us today. Like, this is so true. And it's just being able to push forward. I feel like, honestly, when people read your book, they'll understand what I mean by the drive and the motivation that I felt after, like, I just wanted to continue building. And it's you've also mentioned that like failing in businesses does not necessarily equate to being a failure as an entrepreneur. Do you believe in that there's such a thing as a bad entrepreneur? And what transferable skills do you recommend developing to improve?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um, um, do I feel there's a bad entrepreneur? Wow. I've never really thought about an individual and refer to them as a bad entrepreneur. I think the courage to want to build a business, if you have the right motive, if you have the right motive, like you're not building a business to scheme or trick people, you're not building a business to to for the wrong reasons. You're not building a business to trick people. You're building a business for the right reasons. You are definitely a good entrepreneur. I think a bad entrepreneur will be one that's building a business for the wrong reasons, which is to steal off from people. Now, if I'm speaking to a good entrepreneur, and you've now gone through a process where you've built a business and it hasn't worked. One of the things I mentioned in the book was you got to find ways of saying to yourself, I am not a failure. My business just didn't work. And once you look at things from that perspective, you can then start finding the positives in everything that happened. In every failure I have experienced, they are usually lessons for me to help me with the next thing I want to do, with the next business I want to build. On all the businesses I built, you will see where every time I get to a point where it looks like there's a repeat of something that previously happened, you immediately see how I manage it from a place of experience. And that has worked for me. So because I take those lessons and I want to make sure I do better than the next venture. The other thing I have seen is I mean, I've seen entrepreneurs come up and say they started the first business. 2 months later, I didn't work out. They stopped it. They started the next business. 3 months later, I didn't work out. They stopped it. They started the next business. For that one, I would say to you, even if you had the right intentions, maybe there's something you're missing. And I think I mentioned in the book where you may want to, rather than being an entrepreneur, go and find how you can use that skill set in an organization and be an intrapreneur. Basically, an entrepreneur that is within the cover of a company and bringing that whole spirit of entrepreneurship, but within the cover of a company to express themselves there while learning other skill sets. It may just be that you're not great at understanding financial models. You're not great at making the right kind of investments or recruiting the right kind of people in the team. So when you find yourself in that company, it gives you the opportunity to learn real time from other departments. Some of the people I mentioned in one of the series I had before I started writing this book on 10 people that had gone on to, that were my employees, that had gone on to build their businesses. One example I gave was how each one of them went beyond the departments where they were in to learn new skills. You find somebody that is a graphics designer, wants to be in the finance meeting to just listen. You find someone that's in the finance team that wants to be in the HR meeting to just listen, and they're building themselves. Today, they are running their companies as CEOs. They are investors themselves. They've built great businesses. They didn't get there overnight. They got there by learning. They got there by connecting in other places beyond their core skill set. That may be something you may want to do. The last thing is I mentioned was you may want to just go back to school. School being a business school, network, find a good place to connect again with people and learn and build new skill sets. When I started out when I started out the second startup from Crowdy, I was deliberate about getting into an accelerator program, not because I wanted to just raise money and then demo to investors, but I wanted to go through the accelerator and pick the lessons of entrepreneurship that I was going to get from that particular experience or exercise. And in 3 months, it was one of the best MBA programs on entrepreneurship I could get. I was deliberate about this. This was me who had already had an exit of a startup. This was me who had already helped two other businesses launch their business. But now I wanted to build mine again, and I wanted to learn and I wanted to be better. I put myself through that learning process of going through that accelerator program, and that helped me greatly. So I think just generally, you may want to look at these three things as you continue to build your business. And if you keep having multiple failures, maybe you just want to give yourself a break and then look at another angle of how you learn and build yourself and then come back. On the final note, I'm just talking about this again, Sarah. I also did this when I sold the first startup, Quick Gist. I didn't go back to start building another startup. I knew there were things I needed to learn. And so I took up a job to launch Travel Better and did that for 2 years before I then launched my business, which I talked about also in the book.
Wow, amazing. And honestly, on that note with businesses, I really love the trip story. And I wanted you to talk through how you took trips from an idea to a thriving business.
Okay, so I think so in all my businesses, I don't take credit alone. I had a team of co-founders who supported me. I identified these co-founders from one that was great with sales, one that was great with technology, one that was great with operations. Um, Once the idea was identified between myself and Johnny, we immediately went out and started looking at who could join us in the team to build out the idea. The first founder we're going to bring, a female founder we're going to bring, she already had a business that was doing something similar, but focused on corporates. We had conversations that didn't go according to plan. And then we went on to speak to a second founder, a second entrepreneur who had something similar in the logistics space, but this time around with trucks. 3 days after the conversation started, they said, this is a no-no, it won't work. The third person gave us 24 hours of audience and told us it wasn't going to work. So we then went on to our friends and then looked at who we had worked with in the past that we could bring on to work with us in crafting out the idea. Now, once we started speaking to the vehicle owners to come on board, we struggled to find vehicle owners that wanted to give us their vehicles. I had to use my own relationship to find how we could raise some money to buy our own buses and put them on the road. It was a tough call. Initially, it didn't take off. So the first day we launched on September 16th, 2019, we had bought 17 brand new buses. We branded them and we put them on the roads, and we wanted people to get on board, download the app and get on up. We had only 3 customers that day. 17 brand new buses on the road. 3 customers the entire day. The second day, it was only those 3 guys. I think it increased to 5. The third day, it was just like that. In the first month, we had less than 500 people that had used the service. And we immediately said to ourselves, we had to change it. And so we told the vehicle assistants we had in the buses to go to the bus stops, tell people that, hey, this is a free bus. So the route we started was from Ajah to CMS. So we said, this is a free bus going from Ajah to CMS, a 20-kilometer distance. If you get on board, it's free. So people were like skeptical, but eventually some people started coming on board the vehicle. And then when they enter the vehicle, once the ride starts and we're taking them, like, okay, to enjoy this tomorrow, you need to download our app. And so that was how we started getting people to download our app. Gradually, they download the app, they see the vehicle, they see the aesthetics, they see it's brand new, it's air conditioned, the same price with what your regular bus system out there. All you need to do is download the app, book, you have your seat waiting for you. That started growing the numbers. 5 months after that first month, we had moved 100,000 people, and we started looking for vehicles to move more people. But just then, COVID came hit, and I talked more about that. And you can see more about that in the book, what happened with COVID and then how it affected the model of going forward. But that was how we moved from moving 3 people a day to moving roughly about 9,000 people a day before we got to that point.
No, honestly, that section about the, going to people in the bus stop and getting them to come in to download, that was truly inspiring. When I read that, I was like, okay, you're giving me ideas. I like it. So I just wanted to ask you, like, you lead a very large team at Treepz, and how do you cultivate an environment that encourages creativity, innovation, and personal growth among your team members?
Okay, so when it comes to creativity, we gave everybody a platform to showcase themselves. The way I learned delegation, I mentioned in the early part of the book with Wakana, I try to implement that across board, across the team. So every leader knows they need to have structure in place to support growth of their team members, to support individuals growing in the company, and then identify potential next leaders. So that is a deliberate act we put in place. We give the opportunity to make mistakes. We can criticize those mistakes, but we'll do it internally. We will tell you when you didn't do well internally and give you another opportunity to make new mistakes, not the old one. And so that's something we're deliberate. Don't make old mistakes. It means you've learned nothing. You can make new mistakes, but don't make old mistakes. So we give that opportunity as well. We showcase our team members as much as we can. We've learned how to do that in a way that we do not over push that out, but we do our best to showcase and celebrate when our team members win. So they know that they get credit for that. We at some point shifted away from individual team member celebration to group team member celebration. So you understand that you're celebrating as a group, as a team, as against celebrating just as an individual. Once in a while, we still do that, but we like to celebrate our teams. And then we find real life scenarios of where we make every person in the company understand the impact of your work has affected this person in a real life scenario. So they can see clearly how just moving the mouse and getting a particular task done has had a positive impact on an individual. The other regular things people do, we try to have micro meetings as much as possible with different team members. I am a very accessible person. We have our groups. People can reach me anytime, anywhere. Sometimes they worry that I don't sleep. I actually sleep, but they reach out to me at any time, and I'm responding very quickly to my team members. So that's something that also all the other leaders are also aware of. We also learned the art of building a support system for continuality in the company, so that if a person has to leave the organization, the whole department doesn't crumble. There's somebody else to take on from there and continue to build for us.
No, that's truly, truly inspiring. And I just want to remind everyone watching us that there is going to be a Q&A session. So I'm pretty sure you already have questions popping in. And because there's a lot of you here, I was just would like kindly ask you to pop in your questions in the Q&A, and hopefully at the end of the session we can address some of your questions here. Um, and I just wanted to say that, like, honestly, it's you have the story about rent small small, and I'm wondering if you can let us know a little bit about what that is, and how did you address the challenges with like landlords and the strategies that you use to bring them on board and even
Oh,
convince them.
okay. So the idea of rent small small was getting people to pay rent on a monthly basis in Nigeria, where as at 2017, when the business took off, it was a rare scenario. People still were paying rent at that time. You pay your rent every 2 years. You're paying your rent for 2 years, and so I that idea came from having to do something similar, and then I identified a co-founder in Tunde who we started discussing the opportunity to create a better way for people to pay their rent. Assembled a team of other co-founders in Naomi and Pida to work with Tunde to create what is now known as Rent Small Small. It has evolved from that into allowing people to buy houses small small, to allow people to pay for other items in a very simple, affordable way, as against having to do so in bulk. But that was essentially where it came from. Now, in getting the landlords to convinced about this, I think it's quite similar to what happened with us in Farm Crowdy. If you show a landlord how he's making more money and you can give him more money, he will get on board. But the one trick we had was, how do we get the first landlord to even believe in us? And so we identified that in achieving our goal, we needed to influence landlords to build houses that will allow for monthly rent payments, to build houses that were styled like shortlets to allow for that kind of structure of rent payment. We started having conversations with those ones, but the ones that already had their structures in place, we had to start looking for how to raise enough money to take up those properties for a 5 years to 10 year period, and then demarcate the property and make it into smaller apartments. So a 5 bedroom duplex then becomes eight bedroom, eight apartments within, and we get the permission of the landlord to do this for a period. That had its own challenges. We also started looking at getting insurance in place to show the landlords that your rent is secured for the period that you want it to run. We also started looking at how we do due diligence with the people that were coming on board our platform, to show them that you could actually show some kind of credit check, especially because at that time we didn't have systems to show that publicly, but in Nigeria, so we show some kind of credit check and tie this to your organization. So we're looking for employees of organizations that were reputable enough to stand in with their HR person, saying that, oh, we know this individual and he's going to be meeting up with his obligations. So these were some of the things we had to do. It was a very tough one, very, very tough one for us then. But once we then got the first landlord to then build apartments that were styled in such a way that we could put them out as 1 bedroom apartments, people could pay monthly. um, we started seeing traction. The landlord started seeing they were making more money. And then we started using that as case studies to win more landlords to using the rent small small model. I'm so grateful that has evolved now. The team has been able to take it into something phenomenal. They've broken even. They've been able to raise some funding, raising significant funding from reputable investors, and they are now growing as a business.
No, that is amazing. And I think the story itself was interesting because you think about how, like, in the Western world, etc., like people are able to rent every month, and to just think about how that's not even possible. And then your business comes in and makes it possible with, the right insurance in place. It's truly needed. And it just makes me wonder, like, what were people who couldn't afford paying monthly yearly rent, what were they doing before? So that is another inspiring story that I really, really like push people to read, because it's one of those where it's like you're really changing the mindset of people in with business in Africa. So I think that's so important. Um, So at what point in your career did you realize it was time to start your own business? Because we do like, a lot of the corporate life, and then what drove that decision?
Um, so I already decided that in so I've always been an entrepreneur, right? And one of the things my mom told me very early on was that um, if I really wanted to be wealthy, I needed four streams of income. And she said my 9 to 5 job was just one stream of income. So I had to identify three other streams of income. That thing had always rang in my head since I was 15. So even while I was working, so even in school and the university, I had a website designing um, agency. I talked about how that started. And so at the point that my final year in school, I was able to pay my school fees. At that time, my school fees was around 500,000 naira, and this was in 2000, 2003, 2004. I was paying 500,000 naira per term. I was able to afford that from web design projects that I executed while in school. And so I always kept that running. I had a digital marketing agency. And while working for the organizations I worked for, I still had my agencies on the side. So I always was in that place of building businesses and trying to make sure I had the whole thing about having four streams of income. She used the example of the Bible example of the Garden of Eden. Say you had four streams feeding in. That nourished the garden. So I must have four streams feeding that nourished me. So I was consistently finding myself in a place where I wanted to do that. Now, while I then went on to build my business and then take that business took off, I'm sorry, my career took off as an employee of the companies I was in. I think I decided that I was going to work for 10 years for companies, for other people's organizations. And so I was going to build myself within that time. I was deliberate about what I wanted to get, what I wanted to learn. I learned the art of fundraising in Jumia. I learned the art of delegation and recruitment in Wakanow. I learned the art of scaling from a marketing perspective in Conga. I learned so many things, right? So I was deliberate about what I was picking in each of my roles because I knew I had I gave myself between 2006 and 2016 as a window when I wanted to work on this and then launch my business. While doing that, did launch one business and then sold it within that window, but I still went back to building myself until 2016. I knew that this was the time I wanted to now focus on building my own companies. So it was something I was deliberate about. It wasn't accidental. It was something I grew up in a family where I had entrepreneurs as parents. My dad had his own medical practice. My mom, while she worked in civil service with the government, had several other businesses, whether it's the salon business, the food business, selling ice block. My mom was selling ice block to people because we had constant electricity. She turns water into ice and sell it to people to make their drinks cold. Yeah, so I grew up in that family where I could see us creating value from whatever opportunities that God had given us at the time. And so I think it all was there. And so I was deliberate. I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I gave myself that timeline. And then once that timeline was reached, I started heading towards it. And one of the things I've learned in life is even when I almost want to deviate from the original plan, maybe I get so comfortable at work and I'm earning a fat salary and I feel like, oh, maybe I should just stay back here. I start finding how the universe just crafts out things for me and frustrates me to the point where I start rethinking the fact that, see, you actually had a plan, you had a goal, you had a vision. Why not just continue to chase on that and execute on that? So I think that's what has helped me. And I've been an entrepreneur now for exclusively an entrepreneur now for the last 8 years, um, from 2016. And I'm grateful to God for all the things I've learned and the lives I've been able to have an impact on.
No, that's really amazing, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I think like kind of like right before becoming a full entrepreneur, you were working in, the corporate world, and you mentioned that like you've actually taken a job that paid you less because the experience mattered more to you. What advice do you have for corporate professionals on balancing experience and salary when planning their careers?
Okay, so I think one of the things I have seen personally has been if you have a clear plan and you have a clear vision on what you want to do, you see every move you're making as an opportunity to head towards your goal. That has been my approach to my career, to my business, to every job I've done. And so it helps me in a way stand out, because while other people are looking at it as, hey, I just got a job and this life is good, I am looking at it as a stepping stone to the next thing. And so I'm quite deliberate about how I act on that. Now, specifically to the question, what I've done is I've looked at my plans, and in this instance where I was in Wakana, I was earning at that time 400,000 there. I had a car and a driver. Um, Things were okay, and this was in 2010, 2011, 2012. The opportunity to then take up a new role around offline marketing, which was the last thing I wanted to, and partnership that I wanted to learn. I tried to create that opportunity while in the company I was in then, which was Wakana, but that opportunity didn't come forward. And so I started looking for the opportunity outside of the organization. And once I got it, the only drawback was that I didn't have, I didn't have the same kind of salary and compensation. Sorry about the background sound. It's a weekend, and there's so much activity at the back. So the only problem was I didn't have the same salary band. The only problem was I didn't have the same pec. But I looked at the opportunity as one that was getting me closer to a goal. And so I decided that I was going to make that move. Now, I had responsibilities to people around me, and it wasn't an easy decision to make, because I had a family that I was responsible for at this time. So I had to communicate things to them, but it wasn't everybody I could tell. So as people that asked me why I was making the move, I told them, oh, I was making 2x my salary. I couldn't even, because if I spoke to them and told them why I was doing this, and then I told them, oh, at the end of the day, they would judge it based on, okay, so what are you going to be getting? And you tell them, oh, you want to take what, 52, 55% pay cut? Uh, People weren't going to understand what I was doing then. But it paid off. It paid off because after that period of work with Jumia, I landed an opportunity to consult for GTB, and then eventually landed in Conga. It immediately showed in the work I had learned in Jumia and how that had an impact on what I then eventually did in Conga. I eventually started earning 2x what I was earning in Wakan now once I moved over to Conga. And I couldn't have landed that role if I didn't take the move or make the risk. So back to any individual that is looking to move from corporate life, you've got to have a plan. You've got to be sure and clear about what you're doing. You've got to weigh your opportunities, and you've got to communicate with your constituency, the people you're responsible to. Is it that you communicate to them? You have you have you have a pool of funds that will hedge the risk of not earning at the level you earn, if that's going to be the case. So that, or if you sorted things out and things are good and everything's at the same level, you can grow. You can communicate to them why you're making this, you are taking this risk, and how it will affect your future plans. You've got to win them over, and then you have peace of mind in making that decision. If you can't get that done, I think you need to still focus on continuing your corporate life and don't take that risk yet.
No, honestly, I think it's important to know that, because like also having corporate life is kind of a balance, because you can then you can be your very first investor in your business. So I think that's also something
Yes.
that we often miss. But yeah, I think it's important experience, especially if you know like exactly what you want to do. And kind of going back to when you mentioned you chose CMO versus CTO because you knew exactly like kind of the where that would help in your career. So I think that's also important. One of the stories that really inspires me is the Jumia story. And I really want you to just kind of talk to us about the role you played in its early days, and what key insights did you gain from that experience of it being, you know, the first unicorn in Africa.
I think it was remarkable. At the time we started, I didn't know we are building a unicorn. I just knew we are trying to build the Amazon of Africa. Um, I reached out to the Rocket Internet team in South Africa, only for me to then realize I reached out to them on LinkedIn, and then they responded to me and said, "Oh, we are already in Nigeria. Let's meet tomorrow." And I said, okay, I wasn't going to meet them in person. I did some moves. I don't want to spill out the whole thing. I need people to go and read the book. But I made some moves. I eventually landed a role as a director in one of the arms of their business that was focused on fashion. And then eventually, we took out Sabunta, which was the fashion arm, and Kasua, which was the merchandise arm, electronics arm, merged the two together, and then created what became Jumia. I joined as employee number one through the Sambuta arm, became a director, was responsible for how we were going about recruiting people, setting up the team, leading the marketing efforts for the entire organization. We started out from 1004 estate in a flat where I was sitting on a chair that I was literally sitting on the handle of a chair when walking. And eventually we were able to do some amazing things. The lessons I picked from it was how to blitz scale. There was no other platform I had seen in Africa that had blitz scaled the way we did what we did with Sabunta Kaswa and Jumia. It was an experience that showed me how to fundraise, how to position a business and raise funding. That was my biggest lesson on fundraising, pretty much. It was an experience that allowed me to also appreciate recruiting the right people on the team. Jumia was particular about people that had done their MBAs. Initially, when I first joined, I joined 15 internationals that came together to create that fashion arm. Everybody came from an Ivy League school. They had this thing about you must be from an Ivy League school to start. I was the only one that didn't go to an Ivy League school at that time. And so we all started. I then started focusing on marketing bit. We built out the different platforms and models, and then we launched. I was responsible for launching. I talked about a very, very interesting thing that happened to me when I launched, where almost 3 days later, after taking a pay cut from a previous job, I was being told that you're going to lose your job. 3 days later, it was just an interesting experience. And so we eventually launched. We took the business up. People had so much good things to say. The team then changed. They then started focusing on recruiting people from Lagos Business School, and they got very good hands. They recruited people from other startups. They got very good hands. I saw how they were particular about really smart people coming together to build something. So I think those three lessons were some of the amazing things I had from there. The art of blitz scaling, and taking a business from zero and just turning into a monster. The art of fundraising, and then the art of identifying very strong people and bringing them into a team to create tremendous value for the business. I think those were some of the lessons. And then eventually, I then later on learned that the founders of the business were deliberate about their exit. And so they did everything leading towards a clear exit, that strategy they had. They worked towards it and they achieved it. Reaching a unicorn status wasn't the end goal. They reached the unicorn status, that was good. What they were after was how they would IPO, how they would take the business public, and they eventually did that, put the necessary things in place to get their goal. So I think that was something that I really appreciated from the whole experience. And then watching the business evolve into what it is today. It's now maybe the Amazon of Africa, like they really dreamt of building at that time.
Wow, that is amazing. And I'm excited for those who are going to read that part of the book because honestly, like you gave us some hacks that usually people don't share, but I think
Yeah.
that's really amazing, and I'm excited for people to read the book. I have one last question, and then I see some Q&As here, so I'm gonna answer like ask them to you, and I hope everyone can just drop their questions in the Q&A section here, and then we will be answering them. So the last question I have for you is, having been invested and you're an investor yourself, what are the key qualities investors look for in entrepreneurs, and what are the red flags they avoid?
Hmm. I think I shared something around the red flags with Onyeka community very recently, which is a community where I put together people that want to learn from stories and of entrepreneurs to know what to deal with. But speaking to the lessons of investing, what I pay attention to are, number one, I like to look at the team. And I think it's not far from what other people pay attention to. The first thing is the team. Do you have a team that is hungry enough, that has the passion, that wants to really win? Do you have a team that has the experience previously in something related to what they're building, And do you have a team that has a complementary skill set across the founders, where one is great with marketing, the other is great with technology, the other one is great with sales, or the other is great with product. And in that complementary skill set, you find a winning team that can execute. That is one. The second thing is traction. So while the idea is great, I'm not such a huge fan of ideas because I think ideas can come from anywhere. There's so many people that have more brilliant ideas than Elon Musk, but he's a better executor than them. And so, in the execution of your idea is where traction is birthed. And in showing that you can actually get some traction before my investment comes in, it's a huge indicator that you are a founder that one should be investing in. So traction is a very important thing. How much have you been able to turn your business into a revenue generator and you're bringing in value for people? The third thing is how big potentially is this market? Is this an idea that is just suited for one city, or is this one that can become a global business, where you have people that have a problem that your idea is going to create a solution for, not just in one city, but in multiple cities across multiple geographies. One pays attention to the market size and what that can look like. The fourth thing I look at is potential exit. You're not just investing because I'm not a grant investor. I'm not giving you money to just go and do your own thing. I would want to give you money and see, even for grants, they want to see impact in numbers, right? For my own place, if I'm investing, I want to see the opportunity for you to grow my value, to grow my business, to grow my investment, where I potentially get an exit from it. And then the last one is then what impact will your business have on society? I like to pay attention on real sectors, whether it's how people eat or how people move or how people sleep. So eat with agri or food tech focused platforms, how people move with transportation platforms, how people sleep with prop tech platforms. I'm excited about the health sector. I'm excited about the education sector. One place I'm passionate about is media. So I always still have a soft spot for media and marketing. So these are my own thesis for investing. Different investors have different other theses, but these four things are the ones that I'm excited about. Speaking about the first one, which is on the founders, um, what is a ton of? So I'm going to use all four to tell you the red flags that I see investors look at and they are not really excited about businesses. You should realize that an investor investing in your idea is doing so because they want to build a relationship with the founder. The investment in your business is not for you to just take the investment and then disappear. You're supposed to have stakeholders updates. You're supposed to be able to connect with your investors and give them the right kind of communication on how the business is progressing. Investors like to invest in founders that they feel they will be able to have a strong connection with. And one of those red flags is where they find a founder that doesn't have similar ethos of what they as investors are comfortable with. When it comes to the founder, that may be a red flag for a founder. The second is where they find a team that doesn't have the right dynamics. The right dynamics may be it's a red flag for many founders, for many investors, but there are startups that have maybe succeeded, but it's usually rare. You find that all the founders are all technical founders, and there's nobody that understands how to sell. There's nobody that understands how to um, how to build a team. There's nobody that's had any experience in that. And you just have technical founders all coming together to create something. You need the right kind of balance. It can be a red flag for an investor. A business that has been running for a bit and the traction is not exciting, it can be a red flag. When you're not able to turn your idea into value for people to pay for, it can be a red flag. Where your idea seems to have come in late being that you have competitors that have already crowded the entire space and you're pretty much not the first to come in. It can be a red flag for an investor not wanting to invest in the third or fourth or fifth player, but they want to invest in the winner or the one that comes first and takes it all. So maybe that's some ideas I can share right now as red flags for why investors, which is taking it from also why they will invest and red flags as to why they wouldn't invest.
So taking away from that, like I guess you're saying mainly like if you were to approach investors, it's better to do it when you have traction. Even if like let's say you do require a little bit of funds to get your business started, it's better if you have traction to show them because that's the best way you can actually raise.
Yeah, so traction is important. And where you don't have traction, storytelling is very important. You need to be able to tell a story of how you started, what you're creating, and how it has moved from stage one to stage two. Every time I want to go in and I'm talking to an investor, I don't start talking to an investor from the minute I launch a business. I would rather want to raise my own capital, get some money myself to put into showing some traction for at least 3 months to also grow the value of the business. Because if you're talking to an investor too early, you end up giving up so much more than you would have done if you had some traction to grow the value of your business. So with that mindset, I take some time to understanding when is the right time, and get some traction that I can use to grow the value of the business, if that will help.
Yeah, no, very true. And do you consider traction always as flow of income, or is that something else that can it be something else?
Traction can be, there are different KPIs. It's not just about revenue generated. There are different KPIs. The traction I had in Quick Gist was how many people had downloaded the app, and how many people were using the app daily on a daily basis. We hadn't made any money, and then we're able to raise investment. Why? Because we launched an app, and within a 6 weeks window, 200,000 people had downloaded the app, constantly using it 5 times a day. That is significant traction that is not tied to money yet. But an investor will see that as a potential for that to become, you can use to unlock a revenue pool in the future. So, dependent on the business and the business model, traction can be defined based on the state of the business per time, and it's not always about revenue.
Yeah, it's interesting because just kind of like ChatGPT, when you're looking at the early days of the numbers, it's really how many people used it per that one day it was released. Okay, so no, thank you so much for that. And we have some questions here in the Q&A section that I want to make sure to get to. We have a question about how do I correctly value my startup, especially if it has not built that has not yet had like customer results.
How do I value my startup if it
Yeah, like how
doesn't
do you
have?
make value? Yeah.
So, valuation is created from perception in the very, very early stages of businesses, especially when you have no traction. I mean, as you evolve your business, you start using multiples of your annual recurring revenue, or you use multiples of how many people have downloaded the app or the engagements. You start looking at that and using that to put in some formulas to arrive at an ideal valuation of your business. But in the very, very, very early days, you'll be valuing your business on the potential of what it will become. But the problem with that is it's not going to give you the kind of value that makes you excited. So you've got to be aware of that. In the very early days before traction comes in, one may want to value a business on the founder. I've seen this clearly. There's recently even a particular founder that left an AI startup, a lady that left, I can't remember her name, that left an AI startup very recently. And she just left and said, I will be starting something next year. She raised $100 million. She doesn't even know what she wants to start next. She doesn't even know what the idea will be like. But investors were already lining up because of the credibility, the experience, and where this founder was coming from. She could already command $100 million in investment even before the idea was cooking in her head, or what it was going to become, or even before she communicated what she was going to be thinking about. So there are valuations that can be tied to the quality of the founders that helps in the early phase of the business, and that can have an effect on how you see valuation in that early phase. These two things are the things I've seen. Um, and then also it's because the other things around the potential of the market size and how you would execute, you can't know until you've started. And if you've not started, these are the only other two things you can use to try arrive at some valuation. But I would say for founders, in my when I'm teaching founders or guiding founders, I always say don't go too early to the investors. Don't pitch too early. If your goal is to build and create value, let it be the goal as against from day one, you've not even started. You're talking about you want to speak to investors. You're talking about, oh, the investors are not coming. What are you creating? What value are you bringing to the world? Who is it impacting? Have you given so much time into the product you're building to see that you have the right kind of people? You have customers that are using it, that love it, and want to continuously using it, as against just consistently focusing on a funding round or investors in the early phase. These are the priorities I tell founders to focus on first. Get that level of validation, and then you can start speaking about it becomes easier talking to investors.
Hmm. Actually, there's another question that is very tied to what you just mentioned, and is I find interesting. It's what tractions will be important in a regulated space where you can't launch to even get traction without launching, like fintech, for example.
Mm. Now, what traction is important in a regulated space? I think for fintech platforms already, because there's so many fintech platforms and we have a lot of success from them, they've laid out the KPIs that you should be tracking. Many startups, many fintech platforms have clear-cut KPIs that they know they should be tracking on a daily basis. And I haven't built a fintech platform yet, or maybe my businesses have evolved into that. But I know for sure that um, you want to look at certain KPIs like your customer acquisition cost. You want to look at certain. There's several KPIs that are set out for fintech platforms. Transaction volume, average basket size. You want to look at um, transaction volumes, you want to look at repeat customers, you want to look at retention rates, you want to look at your LTV, your lifetime value of the customer. You want to look at potential contracts that are in place that will help you. So I think for a fintech platform in a regulated space, these templates are already out there. If you ask me in the mobility space, I'll tell you straight those KPIs I deal with. If you ask me in the e-commerce space, I'll tell you because these are sectors I've played in. In the fintech space, I think they already laid out KPIs that you should focus on. Even if it's a regulated space, you need certain regulations to be cleared out. And sometimes you may need good backers and institutions to hold you down. Institutions can be also an individual that creates a network for you, that creates access for you to get the right regulation in place before you start going out to get customers. Um, in the fintech space, for many startups that I've seen that have built out to become, there are two unicorns that I know, the founders that started out in the early days of building out their fintech platforms. They leveraged on relationships they had to open up the channel to access the right kind of regulation and support to grow their fintech platforms. This is Flutterwave and MoneyPoint. And once they had that in place, they were able to scale and then build out a monumental business that today we celebrate.
Amazing. No, thank you for answering that. And there's a lot of questions getting popped in. So yeah, make sure you send them all so we can try and get to as much as we can today. So somebody was saying the early day of Treepz is interesting to me. Well done for managing to turn the tide. And that I can relate a lot. Where do you think you made a mistake in defining your problem and articulating the market potential? I am particularly insecure about this challenge.
I'm particularly what?
Insecure about this challenge of like
Insecure.
defining your problem. Yeah, the person saying that they're insecure about the challenge of like understanding how to define their problem, and it seems like they made a mistake in defining the problem. So it's they're asking you how did you define your problem in Treepz and articulating the market potential.
The truth is that, see, Trips is a product of some pivots that have happened. We messed up at, we didn't necessarily mess up, but the environment made us look like we messed up with certain decisions we made. And I'm not shy to say that. For instance, when we started out, we went to go and buy buses to move people. We then realized that owning asset wasn't going to let us scale fast. Now, COVID came, those assets were grounded. We didn't have people to move, and yet we had loans to pay. It almost ended our business, right? And I think one of the biggest factor I've seen in trips is the dexterity and the resilience of the team, not just me, to find ways to create new opportunities, to bring new revenue in, to create new channel to sell to the market and get new customers to continue to ride. So in the early days, one, we had issues with the fact that we're buying buses. There were investors that said no to us because it was an asset heavy business that they didn't see us scaling so fast with. We had to find ways of changing that. We started out with a B2C model that was moving from bus stop to bus stop. We found out that in growing that, the margins were very, very small to build a sustainable business. We raised money and we invested money in expanding into new markets. That was done deliberately because we were looking to connect with there were strategic investments that were coming in, and that was supposed to position us in that space to grow our business, our reach. Eventually, things happened. We saw that okay, we had to change the model and use that as channels to get into new markets. That's against just being a strategic drive. We started out a logistics channel and we're moving goods and services. We found out that we're struggling with competing with the already existing players. We aggregated tickets from different players and we're providing bus tickets on our platform. We found out that the bus ticket, the buses, so the owners of these buses were also setting up their own websites and we're making sure that the tickets that were fed into Treepz was higher than what they were going to be offering customers that are going to their platform. So Treepz had to consistently find ways of marketing or providing some kind of discount to continue to keep the customers using our platform versus going to those guys' platform. That wasn't self-sustaining. Then came the winter and funding, and we knew that we're in a position where our business couldn't continue to thrive on putting in a lot of capital into what existed at that time, which was moving from bus stop to bus stop. What we saw larger margins on was on the business side of our company. So we then made the tough decision. And I think it's at each time when we make this mistake, we're not scared of making tough decisions to make sure we continue to tweak and tweak and tweak until we find what works. We made tough decisions then to slow down on that B2C side. It made us look like the business wasn't in existence any longer. And in fact, people say, oh, the business was dead. People said, oh, they weren't, because we weren't as popular as we were before. Our buses, we removed the branding on the buses. At the time when we had branding on our buses, we had about 32 buses on the road. When we removed the branding on the buses, we had over 80 vehicles moving people. We're moving more people in the day, but you won't see us moving those people because there were no brands on the buses. But yes, we just continue doing our business. Now, the margin started growing until we reached a self-sustaining position, and it then made us realize that maybe we made the right decision of tweaking this business till we got to this point. Today, we're still experimenting with new things and we know how to go with those new things, but we know what is our main business and we're keeping that and growing that pie for ourselves. So it Treepz in itself, just speaking back to on the surface, it just looks like an amazing brand, and we've gone through different phases of growth. People want to celebrate, but underneath the surface, it's a product of several tweaks, learning from them, making hard decisions, and finding what works, sustaining what works, moving out what doesn't work, and not being afraid to take that out just to make sure we continue to grow the business. And right now, we've now reached 3 quarters of being in a self-sustaining position to almost the point of profitability. I think that is good for us. And even all the growth we're going to be experiencing is currently being fueled by the revenue we're generating in the company. And I'm very excited about that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that question, that answer. So there is another question actually coming in saying, hello, Mr. Onyeka Agunwali here. How do I join the Onyeka community? That's one. And then the second is like also wondering if you maintain a relationship with Nigerian farmers, if this is something that can still be leveraged as an ingredient supply startup.
Okay, so to join the community, you just go to community.withonyeka.com. It's community.withonyeka.com. Once you get on that link, you have a form you can fill. You go through you join the waiting list on a weekly basis. The team, the community team, the WO community team will review the entries and then add you to the community. Will add you to a platform where all the engagements happen, and then it goes off from there. So it's community.withonyeka.com. You get on there, you register, you added into the community after a 1 week period of them looking through your details. So that's where we provide support to. It's getting towards 200 entrepreneurs now in that community, doing amazing things, sharing, collaborating, and building good businesses together. Now, speaking to the second point, on a personal basis, I don't maintain any relationship with farmers, but in my community, you have people that are in the agri-tech space that are doing a lot with farmers that you can work with. From a farm crowding perspective, I talked about how farm crowding evolved and what my role was, and then how that ended for me in farm crowding. So I'm no longer in the agtech space. My whole work now is focused on the mobility space. But if you want to connect with those farmers, if you want to connect beyond this, we can always once you join the community, I can connect you. I think there are about 8 entrepreneurs that are focused on agri-tech, and this is not just in Nigeria. This is Nigeria. This is across Africa. We have about people from 17 countries there. 8 entrepreneurs focused on agri-tech, and I think about 5 entrepreneurs focused on food tech. So all you would have a group of people that are working across different board that you'll be able to connect with and work with and within a community. I hope that helps.
Thank you for answering that. And we have another question from Victor Marithi saying consistency is the biggest boost to keep you going. What would you do when the environment isn't that favorable?
When what is not favorable?
Environment is not that favorable.
Oh, you evolve. You evolve. I think the most similar entrepreneurs should have the cockroach mentality.
Mm.
I think you shouldn't just die. If you still have that vision and it's still strong with you, then just don't die. If you're able to sustain and withhold, we've gone through. Oh my God, in Treepz in 2024, we went through a lot of issues. Every challenge we faced in 2024 were challenges that came from the environment we're playing in. It was nothing related to the business. 2024 should have been an amazing year for us, but the environment changed. The environment changed 5 times on us, and we had to adapt and renegotiate and re-engage and reposition. We just will not give up. And that mentality cuts across everybody in the organization. So that cockroach mentality of saying, I'm not going to die. You hit me from this side, I come from the other side. You hit me there. That has helped us continue to be resilient and continue to push on. So I think that is something that has helped us. Um, Also, you got to make sure that you position your business. So we're very also aware of what the next move is in the environment. So keep our tabs, we keep our ground to the floor to know what is happening in our environment, in our industry, in the places we play in. So that before policies come into play, we can start putting plans in place 3, 4, 5 months before it's even implemented, so that we can adjust and adapt our business to make sure by the time it comes in, it's not a shock to us. Our ears are to the ground. We consistently do that as a business. We build relationships with the stakeholders, with all the stakeholders that are in our space, whether it's from government at all levels to even the operators at all levels. We build a very strong relationship with them so that we can handle those shocks as they come, and we get information even before they happen so we can make changes to them. I think one other thing that's helped me in Trips is having a board of directors that provides advice and counsel when this you can do all the planning and things will just happen, and you have to deal with those things. And going beyond me thinking of everything myself, with my co-founders and my management team, having a board of directors to provide counsel, to provide insight from their own experience, has been very helpful for us in the company in Trip. So I hope that helps the person that asked the question.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And then we have another question from Face Misongo saying, how can I build traction for a transport business with having capital?
With having capital or without capital?
I think she meant without maybe capital.
Because if you have capital, then it's just to spend on. If you give everybody $1 to enter your vehicle, they'll enter. But I
I
mean,
think,
if it's without capital, um, and you're trying to build traction, right? That's the question. So I
yeah,
think one of the things I mentioned in the book was how we're strategic about our positioning to attract people to get into our vehicles so that they can get value for what we're giving to them even before they pay for it. And we found ways of converting that into paid customers very quickly once they had experienced the value we were giving to them. The other thing was storytelling. I was using a lot of my social media platforms to communicate to people why there was value for them in the business, and we were doing that even right before we launched. The other thing again we're good at is how we connect with individuals to make sure with the media to make sure we're able to position that story very effectively and say exactly the things we want to say. I think these have been things that have helped us in the company to really grow our business and get ourselves to a point where we have some traction in transportation. So if you're in the transportation space, you want to show people value before you start getting all the bucks from them. And if you're in a very competitive transportation space, you have to seriously show that value in a way that people will appreciate the difference in moving from the other player to yourself and then sticking with you for the ride. Sorry, I
Thanks so
think
much for
Sarah, you're good.
answering. Yeah. Thanks so much for answering that. There's another question that there's always a story behind a great business idea. What is your favorite one from your own life and why?
Oh, I have lots of stories. What is my favorite story and why? That's an interesting question. Okay, so if I look, because I look at all the things that happen, I think the I have three stories that are really good.
Go for it.
The the farm crowdy story, the farm crowdy story established me as an entrepreneur. I think it was the most popular story that was associated with me. The next story after that was the trip story, and then I think people don't know that I'm actually the co-founder of Rent More. I love that story, but they don't really know that I'm the co-founder of the company because I deliberately didn't want. I even talked about when the launch happened and I was at the launch, but I sat at the back and people thought that I was just visiting and I was using that to get feeders. I mean, I've done that. So for maybe 6 years of that business, people didn't know I was involved in the business. So but I think the farm crowdy and the trip story are the most beautiful. I love the trips one better than all because with mobility and transportation, I can express myself and my skill set in many ways. And all the lessons I've gathered from all the different sectors all comes into something that I really love. The movement of people. I think that in itself is the trip story and the trips business and the trips journey is the most, I think, in arriving at the answer is maybe the most exciting for me because of the different dynamics I can express myself in the business. And so I think yeah, that's one maybe the most exciting one. The story of how it launched is also exciting, where I had that whole experience of commuting across Lagos with different forms of transportation, and eventually landed at a panic. I had a panic attack, and then I reached out to Johnny the next day. I was there playing around the idea in my house, and we came up with the idea of trips. So, like I said, I'm not going to say everything that was in the book. I talked about how all of that happened in the book. So, I think that was also a very interesting story for me, and maybe the most exciting, the trip story. I think I finally answered the question.
Yeah. That's the question, the answer we were waiting for. And I think for me too, it's honestly very, very inspiring, like the trip story in general. But what inspired you to move into those sectors like, agriculture and transportation with farm crowding and trips?
I think it was because in 2009 I decided that there were the three sectors I was going to play in, and that was after there was a session that happened in British Council with a speaker that came and talked about the different sectors that people should be paying attention to and building technology from, and he listed them out. They listed about 8 sectors, real sectors. That was Fela Durotoye that came that day and spoke, and he talked about the health sector. He talked about all the sectors. So once he spoke about the agriculture sector and how people need to eat every day, transportation, and then real estate, I picked those three from that particular session, 2008, sorry. I picked those three from that particular session and said, these were the sectors that I was going to build something in. I picked the hardest one I felt was the hardest one at that time, being agriculture as the first. And because of the timing of when it was coming into play, The next one was real estate. I picked that next, and then the last one was transport. I picked the transportation sector last because there were already players that were playing in the space, but beyond that was I felt like that was going to be my last bus stop to express myself in different forms with the transportation business because I felt it could integrate into several other things. So that's why it became the last one. But I gave myself time in between them, exactly the same time in between them to launch the different businesses.
Amazing. And I love how you said the last bus stop. It's kind of part of the story too.
Yeah.
Um, if you weren't an entrepreneur, what profession would you choose? And
Oh,
I know from the book that your dad wanted you to be a doctor, so
yeah. No, I will never have been a doctor. I mean, now he says I should go and get a PhD eventually. So I think beyond him, I would definitely go back to school and advance my studies later on. But if I was not an entrepreneur, what would I be? I think I would have been I would have been a good computer scientist. I'd have been creating software because I was really good at that at some point, and I can see patterns where people don't see patterns. I'm able to create code. I was creative enough to create code to do amazing things in school. I used to do some really wicked things in school. Wicked in the sense that they were really good, and I also did things for personal reasons, which I talked about in the book. But I was very good with writing codes, and I think I may have eventually become a computer scientist and just creating software for people, and take my introvert nature I was then. I mean, now it's hard for people to understand that I was an introvert, but I was that kind of guy then. I take that bit and then focus on that, and I would have just focused on creating codes for people.
no, thanks so much for sharing that. And I think that I deliberately wanted to make the interview a roller coaster because that's how the book is exactly is, and people will feel the So we went
Yeah.
through different sections and just to kind of end it on a positive note, like, and I'm gonna give you some chance to just express yourself at the end on like how I wanted to talk about like what are your next goals and future plans for going global?
Okay, so for trips, we're very excited about the amount of work we've done in Africa. We've been able to move more than 5 million people. It's actually a lot of people to move within the time we've done that across Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda. We have plans to continue to expand on the continent with a slightly different model, which we'll be expressing ourselves on next year. That's 2025. But we've also had the opportunity to replicate the model in North America, precisely in Canada. And I'm very excited about the partnerships we've secured with the likes of Invest Brampton office, the Brampton office as well, and the support they're giving us, the White Space team from York University, and then also the community, whether it's FOSA of BFN or SARS of Africa Impact Initiative, and just people that have found ways to say they are ready to help us, to support us, to make sure Treepz succeeds in Canada. And we've also not just looking at fancy way of doing that, is we've identified an opportunity to actually do business in Canada and grow our business in Canada, where um, corporate organizations spend an average of about $620,000 moving their employees every year. They can reduce that to as low as $100,000 using Treepz technology. Individuals that go to work in hours after 10 p.m., 11 p.m. in cities across Canada, especially Ontario, suffer from the unavailability of the train system or the bus system because they shut down. Most of them shut down around 10:30 at night and 11. They would then have the opportunity to ride on Treepz enabled platforms across the cities. Schools that have children that want to go to activities outside of the school hours can then do so with Treepz. And then people that just want to rent vehicles on our platform can do that. So we have a market opportunity here to do that, and we're actively going to be doing that. We want to grow from averaging about 10,000 people who move on a daily basis to averaging about 20,000 people who move on a daily basis within the next year. So we're quite bullish about that. On a personal basis, I'm excited about the next chapter of my life. My first 40 years, I talked about my pain. I talked about my entrepreneurial pain and the things I've had to deal with, even while building my businesses. I'm looking forward to how God helps me to direct my steps into another level of fulfillment or growth as an individual in the next chapter, which will include I want to find time to go back to school and do stuff in school. I want to find time to 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 have an impact on other people beyond me. So create that platform, that community to support other founders to build massive businesses as a result of my lessons, whether the good, bad, or ugly, whatever it is, they take from that and they build massive businesses from that. I'm very particular about doing that and becoming a channel for wealth to be moved to all of these individuals. Um, I'm also looking to spend more time with family, to also find myself in a place where I settle and again and just do things from a place where I'm a lot more calmer, from a base with people that love me and people that I can love and do amazing things with them and in this world. I want to do that. So I've kind of put my plan for the next 20 years. I already know what I want to do for the next 20 years, God helping me and keeping me alive. And I just want to start that phase from this 40. I named the book 0 to 40 because I want to talk about my story from 0 to 40. The idea was to make sure that in the period you close the last page of that book, the next page, which is blank, is my own opportunity to have an impact on this world in a different perspective, taking my lessons from what I did with the first 40 and having an impact in this world from a different perspective, from a place of positiveness and growth. So I think that's the essence of what's next for me. And I'm very, very excited. I'm still pumped up. I still think I still not necessarily express myself like a child, but I still think like a child when it comes to creativity and innovation and how I think about those things and want to create new things. I take all my experiences and I still want to be in a very playful and in very truthful and expressive manner, turn them into opportunities and create impact in people's lives. So that is what I'm excited about in the future.
Yeah, I
Thank
mean, I have
you.
a
Thank you,
follow-up
Sarah.
question. I'm not done yet.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
a follow-up question, and then we have one last Q&A popped up, just came now, earlier bit. But what made you choose to write the book now? Like, why now?
It's because I mean it's a very simple answer. It's I wanted to tell my story from 0 to 40. It was inspired by my dad when I turned 37. He watched an interview I did with PC Timmy on the Founders Connect show, and he said, "You need to write a book. There's so much about you that we've seen as your parents and as your in the family that we think you need to find ways of sharing that knowledge for posterity so people can see and learn and experience what you've gone through because there's so much you've had to deal with in this period that whether it's the good or the bad that people can learn from and to inspire them. So he told me that on my 27th birthday. I told him, okay, my dad is a very I learned the art of being persuasive and persistent without being your face from my dad. He will just gradually just chip it in. He's not going to force you. He'll just be chipping in. He knows that it's ringing in your head. And so one day I was like, okay, I've heard you. I will write that book. And he was just chipping in and chipping it in throughout my 37th. And so I said I was going to do it, but I was going to do it when I turned 40. So I told him that. So I started thinking about how to go about it. Then in February of this year, I met a friend of mine who had, she had written 3 books in 3 months. And I got inspired by that. And I told her how I wanted to write my book. And she told me to start recording the notes and then send it over. So she eventually did the ghostwriter and became even the publisher for the book. So she got me to a point where I was able to now tell that story. Now, why it became very important is I wanted that chapter of my life leading up to my 40th to end on that note of me sharing this achieving this goal and sharing everything that I experienced. And then what happens afterwards becomes new chapters of my books in the future where I tell new stories from here onwards, where I start new relationships, where I start new patterns, where I start new opportunities and create new value for people. And I can tell that upwards and then take from my lessons from the past and then make it into something. So that's where that story, that's where writing this book came from. Was there a second question to that?
Yeah, no, there was another question in the Q&A. I didn't read it yet to you,
Oh,
but
okay, okay.
honestly,
But did I answer your own question?
yeah, no, no, perfectly. And thank you for really writing that book and listening to your father, because honestly, it's exciting for what's even to come next. And I think I'm truly excited to read the part two. So I hope you started on that already. So I'm gonna ask you another question from Kagiso Blood, which is a very good question and to really end with. And I just want to say thank you to the people who've stuck around, the same people who joined, the same people are still here, which is great. So his question is, when it is all said and done, how would you like to be remembered?
Mhm. That's a deep question.
That's why
Yeah.
I was happy that this is actually the last question that came, because it's quite great to end with.
I would like to be remembered as a man that created opportunities for people, that left this world empty. Empty in the sense that everything I dreamt about and wanted to build and wanted to create into value for people, I did. I want to be remembered as one of those that, because I came through this world, I made the world better and made people's lives better, not in thousands, but in millions and millions of people's lives better, positively. I want to be remembered as a man that everyone that, and this is something I live by, everyone that meets me as a person, their lives get better for just meeting me as a person. I want to be remembered by my children as a great father. I want to be remembered by those connected with me in whatever capacity as a great relation to have. You know, all of these things I want to be remembered for. But the most important is that I walked through this world, I left my mark, and it was positive, and millions of lives of people were changed for the better because I walked through this world, whether it's through my business or because they met me one on one in whatever capacity, and I was able to have an impact on their lives. So, with that responsibility, I live each day. With that responsibility, there's this consciousness like I have a short window to make sure I have such an impact on people's lives. This is how I want to be remembered.
Wow, and I'm pretty sure we will remember you just as that, Onyeka. And this was honestly such a great first Diamond Dialogue, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it just as much as I did. I really want to thank you, and I cannot wait for people to read the book. Honestly, it was amazing, like truly inspiring. It left me like it's one of those books that you want to keep reading whenever you want to be inspired. So for me, that used
Thank
to
you.
be Atomic Habits, but now I think it's gonna be 0 to 40. So I really truly appreciate you for showing up. My team and I are truly inspired by you, and we're so happy that you were able to do this with us. And thank you for everyone for joining.
Thank you
We're
so much.
cannot wait for a next part or next book or anything next with Onyeka. So stay tuned for that. And remember, his book is coming out soon, so stay tuned for that as well.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
everyone,
Sarah.
and have a good one. Thank you so much, Onyeka.
All right then. Bye bye.
Everyone, bye.